reaction if somebody asked you before watching this video, what makes a great ending? What would you say?
Catharsis would have been a word I would use. Um, I'm trying to think of what I would have thought before this. I knew that they had to have change. I knew change was important in the character, that somehow they had to overcome their flaw. And I knew that they could either get their objective or not, but that the flaw part was the most, that overcoming the flaw and having that change was the most important. And that ideally it would create a feeling of catharsis, and that it was like this moment of like this like pinnacle of emotion in some way. That was all I really understood about endings before I started looking at them the way that he describes, was just catharsis and change, and it should feel important. It should feel
And in
big.
your own scripts, did you think of it in those terms?
I thought of it as resolving flaw. I definitely used the phrase like resolving your flaw. That was something that John emphasized. And I knew that it had to feel big. Like I knew that it had to feel emotional and big, but I didn't necessarily, I don't know that the first word that would have come to mind was catharsis. Um but I would say that I knew that the character had to change, and it had to feel like a punch. Like
Mm.
the more you could bring together all the different things that you did, the better the ending would be for like this epic moment at the end. Um, I don't know. What about you? What did you think about endings before this?
Um, I will say the first time I really started getting into movies, and I was trying to articulate for myself, like, oh, how does this work, and how does this factor into my own writing? The phrase that I would have used is things come together in
Mm.
a way that feels good and
Yeah.
right? Like I remember when I watched the Wes Anderson film Rushmore back in like college, I was very emotional from the movies. Like, oh my God, all the characters we've ever seen, they all have a moment. They're all coming together. Everything is all like there's a final shot, literally of the final shot of the movie is every single character from the movie is all like comes in together on a dance floor together around Max. Like it's like what 30 people all there together. And I was like very moved by that. I didn't understand why. And I think in retrospect, it's a lot of this stuff is sort of like, oh, he made a choice and he changed and yada, yada, yada. But like
Mm-hmm.
things coming together. And I think to pivot to this next diagram we're going to show, this Michael Arndt sort of articulates a great way of like, oh, how different strands of ideas come together, how different plot, theme, character, how do these things come together logistically in the last 2 minutes of a climax in a story? And that's very clever to me. But yeah, I would have said things come together in a way that feels right and good. And yeah, change. We've all been told, oh, a character has to have a flaw and they have to overcome their flaw. And we've all seen that in movies. But
Yeah.
you know, it's kind of vague how that happens, right? Other than when it's right and when it's boring and dull.
Yeah, that's what's so tough. That's kind of what I was trying to say before, is it's like this is a very emotional, it can feel very emotional, and it can feel very kind of like ethereal and difficult to pin down. And this was the first time that I'd ever really seen, okay, let's actually analyze and break down beat to beat what is happening, when these different things are resolving, and in what way. And it was just awesome. And also, he condensed it down to this pivotal 2 minutes that happens in Act 3. So do we want to take a peek at it?
Let's take a peek at it.
Cool.
So just really quickly, I'm going to walk through these beats and then I'm going to talk about the beats of Toy Story, and we could maybe like get into it a little bit. So page 75, according to Michael Arndt, is where the second act break reversal happens. This is where you solve problem B, which is find Buzz. Oh, I found Buzz, but we're stuck at Sid's house,
Mm-hmm.
and he tortures toys and we're never going to get out. And this
Sid is a monster. Gosh, I want to know
terrible
what
character.
happened to him. Well, I guess he's a garbage man, right? That was
Yeah,
the
that's
whole.
right. I never saw Toy Story 4, but apparently
Too
they
bad.
did.
Yeah.
But page 75 is like, you've solved problem A. He's found Buzz, but he's stuck in the evil kid's house and things are coming apart. There's an external setback followed by an internal setback followed by a philosophical setback. So this is a interesting way of articulating the all is lost beat that everybody talks about all the time. External is like the external problem. Oh my God, I've been trapped in this kid's house who's going to torture me. That's an external problem. An internal setback, oh, I'm stuck with the guy I hate more than anything in this world.
Yeah.
And the philosophical setback is he's coming to terms with the fact that I'm never going to be the favorite toy ever again. That is so fundamental to his worldview and his flaw, right? Like, I love being Andy's favorite toy more than anything, and I'll never let you be that, right? I'll never share Andy's love with you, too. There's never a world where I'm going to get to go back in time and be the favorite anymore, right? So all three of those things, he's stuck in the evil kid's house who's going to torture him. He's stuck with the guy he hates more than anything, who stole the thing he loves more than anything. And he has to reconcile with that's never going to happen again.
Yeah. So I think it's worth saying, though, that real quick, that this was something that I think Michael Arndt at least made popular first, was the idea of philosophical stakes as like a really important ingredient in a story, or in a screenplay, at least. I don't think I can't imagine he was the first person to say it for stories, but, you know, he was saying that, you know, a lot of stories have external stakes and internal stakes. And external is obviously to do with problem B most of the time. It's like, what are you physically doing? What are you physically encountering? Are you having to escape from the house and open the door and all these different things? Internal, and like, so the external stakes would be potential of physical harm, right? It'd be like any sort of physical threat. The internal is the emotions. It's stuff that we're used to. It's like what's emotionally at stake, what's going to hurt your feelings, what's going to make you sad, what's emotionally at stake. But then the philosophical stakes was something that I had never heard articulated in this way. And he phrases it as a question when he was trying to like articulate these things. It's like, what is it like, you know, like, what does it mean to be Andy's favorite toy? Or like, how important is it to be Andy's favorite toy? It's like, it's a philosophy, it's your theme. And so I just wanted to say that for a moment, because I thought that was so smart, the way that he articulated theme / philosophy.
All three of those setbacks are an all is lost moment, right?
Yes.
It's not just a sad thing happens, or everybody's sad all of a sudden.
Or everyone is hurt. It's, you know, it's...
Or, oh, Gandalf died. You know, it's all three of these things have to happen in according to this theory, right? Because it's like loading a gun, right? The final fight is the explosion. This is the ammunition by which the character is going to change, right? So if one of these ingredients was missing, like there's an external setback, but there isn't really an emotional conflict to the situation, like it's so much better that Andy's isolated with the guy he's been hating this whole movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
Than if him and Buzz were in separate sides of the room and not able to talk to each other, right? Like that wouldn't really make sense dramatically. But just to come back, restate, you know, the all is lost moment happens at the beginning of Act 3, external setback, internal setback, philosophical setback, and he defines a Judas moment, which is a moment where a character who is an ally of the protagonist for a moment chooses to not outright betray, but to represent the flawed worldview for a moment. Then he likes to talk about this as the dominant value of the world and the underdog value of the world. Like in Little Miss Sunshine, the underdog value. So in Little Miss Sunshine, the dominant value is, you know, what Greg Kinnear's character, the dad, believes. He says, "You're either a winner or you're a loser," and I am never going to let anyone in my family be a loser, right? And that the underdog value is, who cares? I love you. Who cares if you're a loser? I love you, right? Which is such a different thing. He's the patriarch of the family, and he's dictating to everybody in his life that you're either a winner or you're a loser. And it's literally the first words out of his mouth at his little conference. It's the words that define who he is. And in that moment, right when they're Olive is on stage bombing, right? External setback. She's not doing well emotionally. The family is kind of feeling ashamed, and I forget, Paul Dano's character, the brother, for a moment says, "We should pull her out of there. Like, we don't want her to embarrass herself anymore." So that's his Judas moment. He's not a traitor character. It's just a moment where an ally takes the moment to verbalize the flaw. Like, and Greg Kinnear in this moment makes the choice. I'm not going to let my daughter be ashamed alone. I'm going to be a loser with her. We're all losers. And so the whole family rush onto stage and they embrace kind of her. They turn her embarrassment into love by, and that's the philosophical step they takes, right? It's a reversal of that idea. And that is what catalyzes everything.
I think emotionally, I'd say like what this Judas moment is doing is it's showing that even someone who was on the protagonist's side, who wanted to believe in this underdog value with the protagonist, sees and understands just how difficult it is to overcome the dominant value. So it's not necessarily that they're betraying, like you said, it's not necessarily a betrayal like what you would imagine with a Judas moment. It's more just a beat where the person who wants the world to be better alongside the protagonist is saying, oh God, this is really hard, isn't it? And gives us a sense of scale and stakes and just how deeply rooted this dominant value is in the world moments before we overturn it. So, there's little moments like that kind of mirrors at the very beginning in Act 1, where you have the inciting incident, you have rejecting the call, right? Where the protagonist says oh no, there's a problem, but that's too big. And then they eventually have their call to action where they decide to go do it anyway. And the purpose of that beat, the response, is in order to show just how daunting this task is going to be. And in a lot of ways, this Judas moment at the end is almost a mirror of that, where for a brief moment, right before we're about to change, somebody who resonates with the protagonist says, crap, this is hard. And it reminds us of everything that's come before. It sort of solidifies everything that came before and reminds us that, this is, even the person on their side is aware of how hard this is right before we get the shift. So it's neat how it's like a mirror of the first act in some ways.
Definitely. And it's this whole sort of macro moment is, like we were saying, the fuel that's going to really power the emotional catharsis that we get from the final fight, which we're about to talk about in a second. So after having this all is lost, we move into the 2-minute climax sequence, which is a series of really fast beats that happens in just a few minutes. Now, in Toy Story, this actually happens about over 5 minutes, but it's still the same principle. There's a kamikaze moment of commitment. The hero listens to their mentor and chooses the underdog values against their self-interest, right? So in this case, Woody is going to say well, no, I care about Andy's love. We need to get back to Andy. We're not just going to despair here. I'm going to work with you, Buzz, the guy I hated. We're going to get back to Andy together. There's a boy waiting home who loves you, I think is the line. Because Buzz also has a character arc totally separately, where he comes to terms with the fact that he's a toy and not a space ranger. And
sort of like a midlife crisis, but I mean,
yeah, he has that beautiful scene where he jumps off and he finally learns that he can't fly, and he lies there on the ground. It's great. But the kamikaze moment of commitment, they're going to get the hell out of there. And Sid is about to kill them all with the rocket. He's going to take Buzz to a rocket and
brutal.
In front of all the other toys in the backyard. And Andy's house, he's moving. The moving truck is there in the street. They have to get out there. So Woody makes a break for it with, by sort of making an alliance with, he goes to the moving van and he gets the racing car to kind of help rescue Buzz. And that's something he would have never done in the beginning, which is a great point. This whole decisive climax, this has to be done by a character who would be unrecognizable in the beginning of the film. Right. Woody literally threw this guy out of a window to kill him. This time he's risking his chance. He's going to save Buzz, and he's going to risk his chance of seeing Andy again to save him. which is very moving and beautiful. But anyway, so his kamikaze moment of commitment is, I'm going to get Buzz and we're going to come back together.
Mm-hmm.
And they get Buzz out. He's got the rocket strapped to his back. They accelerate and they're trying to capture the moving van. Now, just as they're about, and the car is moving, it's moving, just as they're about to catch up and the toys are all kind of like trying to like grab them and get them out, the car runs out of batteries and the moving van starts going away. So this is where the accelerated beats start to happen. There's an external failure again. He calls it a cataclysmic failure, right? An internal failure and a philosophical failure all at once. So in this case, oh my God, the car's running out of batteries. The truck is moving away. We're done. There's no chance. We're two little pieces of plastic. There's no way we're going to get there across the asphalt in time. An internal failure. The friendship with Buzz didn't work.
It wasn't enough.
It wasn't enough, even after everything. And the philosophical failure, you know, he's sharing Andy's love in that moment, didn't work.
Yeah, it wasn't enough. Nothing was enough in this moment. Yeah.
And in this moment, this is where Michael Arndt makes it very clear. No positive outcome should feel possible. This is like an impossible failure where everything is dark, right? And then you sort of like reverse the polarity with a decisive act, which is a choice the protagonist makes that is fueled by their inner need. This is something they would have never been able to do if it was in the beginning of the film, right? And so what Woody does, he sees a burn mark, he sees a reflection in Buzz's helmet, and it's making a burn mark in his hands. And in a moment of collaboration with Buzz, he just gets this idea to use his helmet to burn the fuse on the rocket to accelerate the rocket towards the moving van, which is not something he would have ever done, but it's a decisive act, and it's a risk. We're going to risk our lives to get there. And they do it. And the reverse polarity happens. From an external failure to an internal failure to a philosophical failure, it becomes an external success, an internal success, and a philosophical success, all within a 2 minutes period of time. This is what gives you that huge emotional rush, right? So when he makes the act to set the rocket and collaborate with Buzz, we're going to go for it no matter what, even if we die. They catch up to the van, but not only that, they accelerate, they drop the car into the van, and as they're flying above, Buzz presses his buttons, the wings cut the duct tape that's strapped into the rocket blows up, and they start flying for a minute. And in the beginning of the film, Buzz used to say, you know, I'm flying, and Woody would say, that's not flying, that's falling with style. And instead, they reverse each other's lines, where Woody says we're flying, and Buzz says we're not flying, we're falling with style, which shows that he embraces that he's a toy and not an emotion and not a space ranger. And Woody embraces, I believe in you, you're my friend, we're going to do this together. So they both have emotional catharsis at the same time. So from that, so they're flying, they're going to get it from the decisive act. Their friendship is stronger than ever, and we're going to share Andy's love together. And not only do they just go into the moving van, they go into Andy's car in the front seat with him. And that all happens in like 2 minutes. It's fucking amazing.
Yeah. And it's, I think that this was the first time I'd ever seen something like that narrowed down to 2 minutes. A lot of times people talk about Act 3, and I would see advice about how to handle Act 3. But the idea to say, no, there's these essential 2 minutes where these different things happen in this really tight sequence that creates this emotional catharsis was really like eye-opening to me. It was something that I never would have necessarily thought to articulate in that way. And the one thing, I think that I really, really like how Michael Arndt has broken it all down. The thing that I will say is that it almost, my one critique is that it almost feels like too many specifics. Like when you look at his graph, it's like there's a lot of things that he has that are like a Judas moment, this kamikaze moment of commitment, like these things that feel very not necessarily neutral. It feels, to me, it almost feels like it gets a little bit too in the weeds, but that he's doing a great job at describing what happens, if that makes sense. And I think that when you kind of distill it down, there's essentially three main things that happen in that 2-minute climax, right? Which is you have this catastrophic failure at the beginning, then you have a decisive action that they would have never taken before, and then you have an unexpected success. And so it's sort of like that back to back to back thing where it's just 1, 2, 3. And that to me is so much easier to wrap my head around than trying to remember all these different mini beats that have to happen.
If you think about it, it's just different flavors of it, right? Like,
oh yeah,
the moment where everything comes together and you've done your job right. Like, this all automatically should happen if you've done your character arc right. Like, if you've made the flaw of their flawed worldview, and it's how they've made choices, and they're making choices in a different way because they've embraced their inner need, the decisive act is going to inherently be something connected to their inner need, right? So you would have the philosophical success, the internal success, and the external. I do think that that's kind of the thing, the internal success and the external success, that I think can get overlooked sometimes, where like people just focus on, we blew up the Death Star, not we blew up the Death Star and, oh my God, my friend came.
Yeah. I think like when you aren't necessarily analyzing a movie emotionally, I think it's very easy to look at the spectacle and to think that that was the most important thing, and to almost lose sight of like, oh, it was the friendship, or like it was this thing that made it so special, not just the fact that they blew up the Death Star. And seeing it all laid out this way, constantly being reminded of internal, external philosophical stakes at every step of the way, and how we're doing in that moment, kind of tracking the progress of those, was really enlightening. So it's this 2-minute climax idea made my endings 20 times better. You know, it's a really solid plan. And like I said, I think that it might look complicated. I would recommend watching Michael Arndt's video. It might look complicated because there's a lot of things happening on his graph, but really it's just kind of a three-beat thing where they have a catastrophic failure right out the gate. They make a decisive action they would have never made before, and then they have an unexpected success. And that's kind of like the distillation of what he's talking about. So it's neat.
I love it. We have a quick moment from our sponsor. I'm going to bring in Carl for a second to talk about something. Hi, Carl.
Hello. Yes, I'm Carl. Today's sponsor is Young Screenwriters.
Wow.
Who knew?
That's right. Young Screenwriters is the community you know and love for up-and-coming screenwriters. And we offer a range of courses, a suite of courses, but we are having a sale for writing the pilot, writing your original series. Right now, you can get it for the low price of just $102.90. It's 30% off until July 20th. If you want to support young screenwriters, or if you want to invest in your writing career and learn how to write your series, Writing the Pilot is the course for you. We've had a number of students go through this. They've all complimented the process that's shared in this course from Alexie and Adam. It's a wonderful resource, and it helps support us, and it helps kind of give you a nice foundation for your own writing. And that is today's sponsor.
Thank you, Carl. I love it. And also, I'll add, we have free courses if you have no money. Writing the short and writing the scene. People love those. So give them a go.
There we go.
Now, let's go back. So, Alexie.
Yeah.
We've covered the basic theory, basic why, and we gave an example with Toy Story. What is after the fact? I know we've been talking about like, oh, it's easy to wrap our heads around like, you know, this 2-minute sequence with 3 beats. But like when you're writing out, like I've had the experience of, I've tried to write with this outline a few times, and the most recent script I'm working on, I don't think I did these beats actually. You know, I had it in my outline, and I'm looking back and I'm like, I should kind of have thought this out more clearly. But sometimes, you know, a story flows and you just have to write the next thing that happens.
Yeah.
and we don't want to give people an arbitrary formula. Like, this is best used when it's like rocket fuel to like accelerate and like puncture the drama, right? Like, if this is the best way to tell your story, it's the best way to tell your story. If it's not, it's not. But although I do think my script would probably be better if it had like a better final fight.
No, yeah, I think, this wasn't necessarily something that I thought of. Like we mentioned before, it wasn't something that was on my radar when I was writing scripts before. But now I'm like, there's projects that I do where I have to write a 30-page script every week. And every single one of them, I steal this formula. Every single one. I have these 3 beats in the final fight that really make it work. And it's funny how well it works again and again and again, and how it helped, even though by now I'm just kind of like, oh yeah, it's the 3 things I have to do. Very predictable for me as a writer when I'm going through my outlining process. I know I'm going to have these 3 beats, but it creates something that's, surprising but inevitable and interesting, and has these like emotional payoffs. And yeah, I have the unique experience right now of trying it again and again and again, over and over and over.
What's the takeaway of that?
Oh boy, of just like the process overall, or doing the endings over again and again?
Endings again and again.
I think that the thing that is always the most rewarding is when I can make sure that every single piece mattered. So like, the antagonist wasn't just a random person who didn't like the protagonist for some reason. I give them like a deeper emotional connection to the protagonist, so that when all these failures happen, it's personal, right? Like, it's kind of, it's this shift of making sure that you're making everything as personal as you can. And those are the stories that tend to stand out and be the most interesting, is when I can make this the beat at the very beginning of the end, where, you have the catastrophic failure. I want that to be personal. And sometimes it's easy to kind of overlook that because you're technically blowing up the Death Star. You technically have something like sad happening. But I think that the philosophical failure is really what makes it personal. Like, it's about their personal connection to these emotions, and their personal connection to these external features. And so I would say that's my biggest takeaway, is that after doing it again and again, it works best when it's personal. And I think that really happens through the philosophical stake / theme.
Interesting. For me, the philosophical stakes were something that really resonated with how I see flaw. And that's actually how I begin stories. Like, I think of character in the sense of, what is the thing that drives every choice this character makes in the story that they need to grow beyond? Right? Like, I think sometimes the word flaw, I mean, I call it a flaw academically, but like, when I'm writing, I'm trying to think of like, what do they need to grow past, and why are they making choices because of this? Like, it's almost like I don't see character beyond flaw, if that makes sense. Like, they are the statement that defines them. Like, they are that thing.
Yeah, it's like, so for me, it's the philosophical stakes is what makes the flaw matter, because it doesn't really matter if someone's just arrogant, right? Like, arrogance is technically a flaw, but it also doesn't have any depth at all. The philosophical stakes are that's what makes the arrogance relevant, and is like, it shifts the flaw into a worldview in a lot of ways. It's not just like one annoying thing that this person happens to do.
That's right.
It is like the tip of the iceberg that reflects the entire way that they view the world. It reflects like their entire philosophy of the world. And so the philosophical stakes really make the internal stakes, the emotional stakes, matter in a bigger sense than just, oh, this dude's obnoxious. Or like, oh, this dude really prioritizes his job over other things. The philosophical stake is what puts it in juxtaposition to like if this dude prioritizes his family or his job as his flaw, the philosophical stake says, and he's prioritizing them over his family who needs him. And, it's what makes it matter.
And when it's personal, it's almost always about relationships, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that everything is personal. Like every story, no matter if they, like in what is it, Die Hard, one of Carl's favorite movies, I don't necessarily think it's the most tied in, the best tied in ever, but like we have that climactic moment where he is like remembering his wife and talking to that cop outside about how he accidentally shot a kid, which whoops. But like they have that moment where they have this personal connection and they pull in this personal thing. And for the most part, when you think about Die Hard, you're thinking about him like crawling through the vents and like all the action of it. And even that film, they elevate it by making it personal at the end. So it's always personal, no matter how actiony we think it is. The Fast and Furious is all about familia, right? You gotta make it emotional.
Or also how historical or political, whatever,
Yeah.
No matter what the nature of the thing feels to be, if you make it personal, it will be compelling. You can make a story about the engineers who built the first toilet interesting if it has a personal drama that's compelling,
Yeah.
and you give strong reasons. People will be interested in porcelain. And
is that the name of it? The name of the movie is Porcelain.
That's great. Porcelain. Red porcelain, because people get killed in the anyway.
There you go. Yeah, and it really ties back to the choices you make at the beginning, because again, you kind of have that mirror where when you're choosing the protagonist for your story, you need to be able to answer the question of like, why this person? Why is this person the protagonist for this story? And the answer is always something personal. It's always like, because this thing impacted their life specifically. It was a direct affront to them and their family, and they lost a lot. Luke lost his aunt and uncle. So now it became personal to him. He has to be the one to solve this because his aunt and uncle are dead now. So now it's personal.
That's a great example. I just wanted to bring up a comment about Sylvester, that they could be uncomfortable things like what Woody did to get along with Buzz for Andy, right?
Mm-hmm.
It has to be a sacrifice of some kind, right? Like for it to feel emotional. Like when people do self-sacrificing things or things that feel self-sacrificing, it's sacrificing like the old you is how I see it, right? Like it's emotional if it feels like, wow, this person did the act of doing something you would have never done before, I think is an act of sacrifice. That's the verb I would use for like whatever the decisive act is.
Yeah, it has. I think that's a good kind of, descriptor that has to be on that decisive action, right? Is that it has to be, like you said, it has to be some sort of, or like, especially like their moment of commitment, the all or nothing.
Mm-hmm.
It's a moment of abandoning their flaw in a really dramatic way. And they didn't choose their flaw for nothing, right? This flaw has been something that has like sustained them for a long time. It's something that has protected them in a lot of cases. Woody doesn't just want to be Andy's favorite toy because it's his entire identity. It's his entire, like all of his self-esteem is wrapped up in being Andy's favorite toy. And it's the way that he kind of, justifies his existence and like what motivates him to live day to day. And so when he has to give up that flaw, it is a sacrifice. And normally you want to push it even further than just giving up the flaw. You want to put them in real jeopardy. But, it's giving up that flaw needs to be painful. And if you bake it into the philosophical stakes, it almost always is painful because you've made it matter to who they are and their entire worldview. I love the psychology of this stuff. I could,
math,
Yeah, it's mathy. The one math I like, I had a nightmare that I was failing calculus, and then in my dream I remembered I'm not in calculus, and that was amazing. So
All the power went away.
all the power went away. Yeah.
So just to restate, I highly recommend people watch this video if you have an hour and a half. It was very inspiring to me, and I think it's a really great representation of, hey, how do you end a movie?
Yeah.
Like you got a 2-hour script or 2-hour movie. What do you do? How does this work? And the only half of it is actually the theory. The other half is 3 examples. He breaks down Little Miss Sunshine, the original Star Wars: A New Hope, and The Graduate, which are 3 very different movies. And it's a great video. You should watch it.
Yeah, I highly recommend it. And just to kind of summarize the distillation of this, it's really that as you go into this 2-minute climax, you run out the gate committed to doing something. You're throwing your all or nothing, you're going to go do it. And then immediately you're hit with this catastrophic failure where everything sucks and it feels like there's no possible positive outcome. Like it feels like you changed and it was for nothing, right? Like it feels like everything is screwed. And then you decide to do something anyway. In this moment where you feel like you have nothing left to gain by still being committed to being a changed person, for better or for worse, something important to say. You feel like you have nothing to gain by being a changed person. You still dig into it anyway with a decisive action. And then that leads to an unexpected success or a surprising success. So the way that is expected is usually the moment that you fail, right? Like that moment right when the catastrophic failure is usually what the predictable success would be. And in that moment, you don't achieve it. But then you try one more time and you succeed in a different way in the unexpected success. So that's sort of a distillation of what he's talking about, the little tiny emotional roller coaster that packs a lot of punch in these last 2 minutes. And I really hope that you'll check out his video. And we have a link in the description. And he has other great videos too on beginnings and everything. All of it is worth a watch. But thank you so much for joining us today, everybody. And we hope to see you next week. Bye.
Adios.